So how did anything come around with you in filmmaking in general?
Well, the short answer is I like to think that everything that's happened to me in the film industry has always been accidental. And
I like that. I think that's good.
pretty much right from the top, it was a series of accidents and misunderstandings, which led to led to the current set of circumstances. And they're all projects that I kind of instigated at one point or another, but usually it took 5 to 10 years for the projects to mature and actually get made. And at the point when somebody finally picked up the script, like at the point where Color Out of Space came into Nick Cage's hands, or the point where Harvey Weinstein picked up the hardware script, it was seldom my doing. Usually the scripts had floated around for 4 or 5 years first, and then through a series of bizarre circumstances have ended up in the right inbox, and maybe the wrong person or the right person has ended up encountering them. It's always come out of the blue. When Nick called me first in Montsegur in the middle of the night at about 3 a.m. from a payphone in Las Vegas, I didn't believe him. My first inclination, it was 3 in the morning. It's like this nutcase thinks he's Nick Cage. And I thought it was a setup. And my response to the Weinsteins was pretty much the same. So there's always been an element of weird karma about it. I've come to believe that it's usually the project that wants to get made. As with the way that Lovecraft is suddenly becoming a thing right now. I've wanted to make a Lovecraft movie all my life since I was 13 or so. But for some reason, no one's ever been keen on it until suddenly now in the 21st century. It's that material is in demand.
Well, I think it's interesting that we're in. Like it's too difficult. You can't talk about Lovecraft without addressing people's instant thoughts on Lovecraft, which you have like a few different. Personally, I think you have like a few different people's thoughts, right? You've got like mainstream media's thoughts instantly are, well, he's a racist, he's this, he's that, what a terrible man, awful, blur, whatever. And then you've got the individuals which obviously, have actually read the material, know, the sort of background and the history and sort of the time period that he was from, and all manner of things. But it's interesting, I think, that you find him come into prevalence now in an era where it's so critical of race on a whole. Anyway, I find that to be an interesting sort of parallel. You wouldn't imagine someone who mainstream media paints out to be an isthenophobe and all manner of negative words to then come to kind of prominence at that point in time. I think it's quite fascinating, to be honest.
It's super bizarre, that's for sure. I mean, I think it's a whole mishmash of factors, socio-political factors, and also the ghastly environmental circumstances we currently find ourselves in. I think it's the beginning of Nyarlathotep, where Lovecraft talks about how the world feels as if it's passed from the known order into some new universe where we're now ruled by unknown gods and unknown forces that we can't fully comprehend.
I like that.
I suspect that speaks to contemporary hearts in some way. It's a thorny matter because you can't really deal with Lovecraft without dealing with his racism.
No, you can't. You can't. But also, like, I think therein lies part of the issue, is that people try to sort of quantify it rather than just view the stories as his outlet for what he couldn't comprehend and couldn't understand. And that is obviously the inspiration behind a lot of what he was writing at the time. Like he didn't understand it, he couldn't comprehend it, he couldn't wrap his head around it, and there was bigotry involved there and things like that. But
well, I mean, Lovecraft's racism is kind of a manifestation of his anti-humanism in a way, his hatred of everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally everyone. He was a very a massive recluse. Like it was xenophobia of all kinds, literally everyone that wasn't from, he sort of idolized, certain cultures and things like that, and sort of painted himself out to be, of a certain standing. And anything else outside of that, he sort of didn't comprehend and understand, was scared of, fearful of. He wasn't particularly well man, I think, in terms
Not
of
by
sort
our
of
contemporary
social
standards.
anxiety.
I think it's worth noting as well at the off with any discussion of Lovecraft's isms and his misanthropy, to note that there's at least 3 Lovecraft stories that end with the lead character realizing that the monster is in fact his own reflection. That's kind of how, the outsider ends, as he reaches out to touch the monster and his hand touches an unyielding surface of glass and he realizes he's looking in the mirror. But pretty much the same thing happens at the end of Shadow over Innsmouth. Pretty much the same thing happens at the end of Arthur German. At the end of Shadow Out of Time, he finds the manuscript written in his own handwriting. So I think when it comes right down to it, Lovecraft's really frightened even of his own reflection. I think even himself is not exempt from his rather dark sort of view of humanity. Certainly,
no, I like that.
I imagine it's probably true. The folk who knew him don't think that he was particularly unpleasant to anyone in real life. He was kind to his neighbors.
He was really nice.
Yeah, that's what we hear all over. And of course, he married Sonia Half-Green, who was Jewish. It's difficult to really match Lovecraft to the kind of the racist cutout that we try and force him into. A lot of the more inflammatory remarks that have come up in the media are actually things which are culled from the letters he wrote to his aunts in Florida. There's no doubt that his aunts were completely dyed-in-the-wool conservative racists. And I suspect Lovecraft was basically erring in their favor and using their language when he was talking with them. But I don't think the letters to the Florida aunts really reflect his true character.
No, I think you're right. Like, I think to sort of paint him in, again, like modern day society, we like to put people in boxes so we can categorize them and things like that. And I think you're right there. I don't think he fits in a traditional sense of what we consider, this is what it is, that's just what it is. I think
his views on humanity don't seem to be, far beyond the notion that we're a crawling mass of maggots or insects. How do you describe the New Yorkers again? Hordes of teeming mongrel vermin streaming through flume-like streets.
It was quite a rough description.
I think it's very much a Rocky Horror Picture Show notion of a bunch of insects crawling on the planet's face, waiting to be cleared away by some completely impersonal alien or physical force.
So, what is your? You said you wanted to make a Lovecraft movie since you're, like 13, for instance. What was your earliest knowledge of Lovecraft, and where did that stem from in terms of, to get you are, where you are today? And then obviously with the Color Out of Space. So what's your earliest recollection?
I was really fortunate or unfortunate enough to have been indoctrinated into the Cthulhu mythos since I was a child. This was really the fault of my mother. My mother, Penny, was a massive Lovecraft fan. Lovecraft was her favorite author.
Good taste.
And she introduced me initially, I think, through her drawings and paintings. But she read me Dream Quest for Unknown Kadath as a bedside story from the time I was about 6 years old. So very early on, I think Kadath was kind of the gateway drug, the thin end of the wedge. And of course, by the time I was 12 or 13, I was playing Call of Cthulhu, the role-playing game, and had a thorough grounding in the mythos, and became a Lovecraft geek nerd at junior school. It just came naturally.
An acolyte, as it were.
And I guess by the time I was 13, I was old enough to have seen most of the Lovecraft movies that were around, and had realized that they were a pretty poor crop. The thought had started occurring to me that, shit, I can do better than this. or
Mm.
someone's got to do a better job. So the seed of the idea that the main stories really needed to be adapted by someone.
Yeah.
That sort of how come we don't have more colors out of space or more calls of Cthulhu, when theoretically, like Dracula or Frankenstein, somebody should remake them at least once a generation.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't know whether I would say, I don't know whether I would agree with remaking, just because I think some people can do it so well. But then the originals are always there. We just live in a bit of a remake society nowadays, don't we? Where remakes galore are always a bit of a nightmare. But you are right, like the the development and adaptations of any Lovecraftian work has been very few and far between. But it has seeded so many horror writers which have had their adaptations. I mean, Del Toro lists Lovecraft as his main inspiration. You got Stephen King, very Lovecraftian inspiration, and those two individuals. I mean, Stephen King, everyone knows Stephen King, but then no one, or very few and far between out of people who know Stephen King would be aware of the inspiration behind his works, which I think is a travesty, quite frankly, because you're doing yourself a disservice not to understand where your favorite horror writer's inspiration comes from, because surely the inspiration would probably be to your liking as well. So how? Oh no, please go ahead.
Well, I guess another good example would be the Alien series and the influence through H.R. Giger and Dan O'Bannon, who is also
Absolutely.
responsible for that adaptation of The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, and who's a clear card-carrying Lovecraft fan. It's another mainstream franchise that owes a big debt. Up to now, most of what for me feel like the best Lovecraft movies, or the movies that are the most Lovecraftian, are usually not adaptations of Lovecraft's work, but are movies that have assimilated the ideas and made their own fist out of it. Here I'm thinking John Carpenter's The Thing. We all secretly love and adore Andrei Zulawski's Possession and Isabella Gianni mating with the tendril monster. Many of the great Lovecraft moments in cinema are not in Lovecraft movies.
Yeah, no, I mean, you are completely right there, actually. Yeah, very true. I think I always think about John Carpenter's The Thing, but I never, it's not one of those, when you point it out that, Lovecraft, I mean, it is, yeah.
Well, we see the influence of The Mountains of Madness on John W. Campbell's Who Goes There, which I think came about 1 year after Mountains of Madness first appeared in Amazing Stories magazine, and probably set the template for it. It's actually super hard to go back to Mountains of Madness now, like Del Toro wants to do, without it feeling like an imitation of The Thing or a knockoff of the Carpenter movie. It's difficult territory to approach.
It is, yeah, you are right. It is now, because, of course, someone else took inspiration from Mountains and then developed something which then became iconic in and unto its own right. Did a very good job of it, like, of course, but it would be. Yeah, you are right. It would be difficult now to sort of go back to something like that and make it your own, or make it Lovecraft's own anyway.
That's pretty much been the case of most of the main stories, in that Color Out of Space, also the basic template, is so shop-worn and so well used. I mean, any movie where essentially a comet or a meteorite strikes an isolated farmstead and the local hick wearing dungarees comes out and pokes the meteor with a stick is on some level kind of descending from either Color Out of Space or Wells's War of the Worlds. But that's begat all kinds of mutations, from the Quatermass experiment through to the Blob. So it's extremely familiar kind of archetypal territory to wander into, which is why I think adapting and readapting these things is such an interesting and challenging prospect, and why I would like to see more people interpreting it in different ways and versions of these stories set in different cultures.
So I mean, let's talk about Color Out of Space then. So how on earth did that come around? Because the first I heard of that must have been so the very first time I heard that that film was even happening must have been something to do with TIFF. I think like there was like an image shared for the Toronto International Film Festival, and I think that was probably a lot of people's like, "Oh, what's going on here? What's this? What's this?" Because it was I've got the image. Oh no, I don't have the image. It was the beautiful shot of the car, Nick Cage, and then all obviously the sort of purple and the pinks and the hues coming through in the background. It was just that one shot. I swear it was that shot which was shared. It's such an amazing shot. So how did that film come around from start to finish? I mean, you spoke about Nick Cage obviously calling you, but prior to that, you know, how from inception, from scripts? Tell us the story.
Kind of a series of accidents and odd coincidences, but it came about pretty much because of the place I'm living in. I'm living in the French Pyrenees, deliberately in the weirdest place on the planet. Kind of the creepiest place that I've so far been able to find in my life.
So that's what you're trying to find. Just can I live in this creepy place here? Yep, cool, right. Look, I'll go to another one. Get inspired.
Well, it kind of adopted me. It's been very, very kind to me over the years. This place has taken me in and protected me. I've developed a relationship with the ruined castle, which I guess is similar to Renfield's relationship with Dracula. I'm pretty much forced to take care of the thing. So that's happened over the years. And while I was living here, the thought occurred to myself and many of my visitors that this is just like living in a Lovecraft story. Why don't we shoot a short Lovecraft movie? And this then led to writing a short movie. Initially, this was an adaptation of Clark Ashton Smith's The Mother of Toads, which eventually became the opening segment of the Theatre Bizarre, the anthology movie that David Gregory put together for Severin. Initially, the script was just evolved as something we could shoot locally using our giant Pyrenean toads. 30 of which appear in the movie, to try and do a Smith Averoyne Lovecraft Fulci homage. Then it was shot super fast, and I think the entire budget was 20 grand. Nice. After Theatre Bizarre became a thing and it was incorporated into the anthology movie and became the opening segment, the financer, the backer of Theatre Bizarre, who was in fact the impresario of the West Virginia Concrete Company, who was putting concrete money into cinema.
It's a very interesting sort of avenue to go down, isn't it? Which is concrete, just put some money over there as well.
Yeah, totally random. But the impresario of the concrete company fancied Mother of Toads and liked the locations, and then flew out with his girlfriend to visit Montsegur and to visit the location. Proposed to his girlfriend in the haunted castle. She said yes. He was in a very happy, ebullient mood. And said, "Wow, why don't you guys write a feature-length Lovecraft movie that we could shoot locally and shoot right here?" And I went, "Wow, okay, I'd love to do that. I'd really like to do an adaptation of the Dunwich Horror, because all my life I've wanted to create to visualize or manifest Wilbur Whately and his family in a way that actually satisfies me or reflects the story." And the guy I was talking to didn't get this and said, "No, you should do Color Out of Space." And I was like, "Well, how can I do that? That's such a, there's no such thing. The color doesn't exist in the human spectrum. How are we supposed to even visualize that?" He was very insistent. I was broke at the time. And thought, okay, well, this is never going to happen. But if he's willing to throw a few pennies in the hat to create a draft, why not? So over the course of the next 6 to 8 months, sat down and drafted Color Out of Space, which initially was very different from the movie that ended up getting made. In its initial iteration, we wrote something that could be shot simply in the place we were living. So. way. So the Gardner farm in the first draft is in the south of France.
Nice.
In the first draft, the Gardner family is a British family. Mr. Gardner's a retired accountant, and his wife, who's in the part where she's recovering from cancer, was still there. They retire to the countryside, buy a French farmhouse, and have a Looney Tunes idea that they're going to raise alpacas, which is actually very typical of British expats. They tend to buy.
Is it?
Yeah, they tend to buy large properties when they retire. They've usually spent their entire lives working in the city or in some kind of office environment. And in the back of their mind, some crazy notion that one day they're going to move to the south of France and they're going to start a yacht charter business, or they're going to have mohair goats and make mohair sweaters, or they're going to raise ostriches. Some kind of Looney Tunes money-making scheme is in the back of their minds, usually when they move out here. They usually think it'll take 3 or 4 years to set up, and then the mohair business will get rolling or whatever. It will help with the liability of taking on the place.
Well, as a Brit, I do apologise for inflicting that, upon the world. Apologise for my part in that.
It's kind of over now because since the whole COVID apocalypse broke out, tourism has really dropped off to nowhere. With Brexit as well, there's been a great dying of British expats out here. But part of the issue has always been that most of the couples involved, the retired couples, haven't spent a lot of time around each other before. They've usually been separated most of the time, with the husband working or the wife at home. Then suddenly they're stuck together in an isolated, decaying location in the former family house, trying to raise alpacas or mohair goats. Usually they develop severe drinking problems within the first 2-3 years. The local gendarmerie are well aware that usually they start getting called out on a frequent basis after 2-3 years. And 9 times out of 10 it ends with bankruptcy, people selling the property. Usually the neighbors are just waiting, looking over the fence for the Brits to finally for their business to fail. I recommend always to people before they move to the south of France that they strap down and watch Jean de Florette, which is a French period movie which really accurately describes what happens to so many people out here. I love it. To some extent, the initial draft of Color Out of Space was much funnier than the movie we ended up making, because it was also a black comedy about Brits abroad.
Right. Okay.
There was a running gag we eventually had to lose, unfortunately, which was the character of Amy Pierce, the neighbor. And Amy's pretty much gone from the finished movie, but was retained in the earlier drafts, and we made Amy's family fully French-speaking. The first draft, there's innumerable gags where Amy's family utterly failed to comprehend what's happening. Because that's what happens when you have a limited amount of franglais. You go to the fence and talk to the neighbor, and it's like, "Ça va bien? Ouais. Yeah, I'm good. Nice day." But to try and explain that you think that your family and children are being taken over by an extraterrestrial influence, it's too much. That way around, there's a sense of dreadful isolation in the original script. Only the wife mother could speak French fluently. And in the script, she was, of course, the first to be put out of business. And the moment the mother is incapable of dealing with the neighbors anymore, the flailing efforts of Nathan and Benny to try to run the farm was the source of much sick comedy in the initial drafts. I tried to hold on to that.
Yeah. So how why did you go from? I assume it's just like the money men said, well, we need to change it from this to sort of this, as the drafts process sort of got filtered down. Is what happened from the initial draft downwards to what we got?
Well, by the time we'd finished working on the initial draft and turned it in, I think everything had gone wrong for the people who suggested we'd write it. The guy who commissioned it, I think, was in rehab already by the time we got to the end of the script. So there were no takers, and the script languished. David Gregory from Severin picked up the tab and paid for the script. and it floated away for a few years. And when attempts were made to set it up, it became clear we couldn't do it in France. Apart from the union issues, the French cinema seems to have no interest whatsoever in sci-fi horror.
Yeah, they're not notoriously known for stuff like that, I don't think.
Yeah, they understand horror. Horror is always kind of psychopaths and a level of violence and brutality.
Martyrs,
if you go down,
Martyrs rings out to my mind when I think of French horror. I'm like, yeah, Martyrs, which is brutal and is a very painful watch. It's a good film, one I would never watch again, but it's still a good film.
I like Pascal. I enjoyed Martyrs. I actually worked with Pascal, who was camera operator on The Secret Glory, on the Nazi documentary I shot. Yeah, Martyrs is a good example. And when the French do science fiction, it's always the fantastique. It's like Valerian and the City of Wonders or Fifth Element, and trying to get really go down the John Carpenter's The Thing or the Alien route and do serious full-bore sci-fi horror is something that seems alien to the market. So we've failed to draw any interest from Paris on the material, and took it to Canada, and initially tried pitching it at the Frontiers Film Market in Montreal, and started kicking it around, and then wrote an iteration of the movie which relocated the Gardner farm to Quebec. I tried to keep the French, the Anglophone, Francophone comedy in the movie by making Quebecois. Yeah, and I made in this point Teresa, the mother-wife, became of Quebecois extraction, and at this point Nathan, the family, became New Yorkers who have moved back to the family farm in Quebec. And I thought, okay, Quebec, it's fine. It's still in Lovecraft territory because of To Quebec and the Stars, Lovecraft's Looney Tunes Traveled to Quebec, which I quite fancy as a book. I tried pitching it as a Canadian movie for a period of time, and no joy. And then after a number of years, it was really at the time when we were playing Lost Soul, the Island of Dr. Moreau documentary, which was something of a surprise hit. Mostly because it's funny. Lost Souls is probably the most consistently funny thing I've worked on, and I noticed that it was getting bigger and bigger laughs, and it played for about a month at the Cine Family on Fairfax in Los Angeles, and I developed the habit of doing sort of hour-long Q&As with the mic on stage every evening, which essentially gave me a sort of hour-long stand-up spot on Fairfax for about a month. This enabled me to meet a lot of people, and a lot of unusual people showed up in the audience. Eventually the question was asked, did I have any scripts? And I floated the Color Out of Space screenplay out there. Then via Spectre, it came into Nick Cage's hands. And I believe the story there is that literally Elijah Wood and a couple of other guys got in the car and drove physically from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, met Nick at a bar, literally dialed my number on the cell phone and put the cell phone in Nick's hand, which is when the initial connection happened. When we did talk, all he wanted to talk about was the hot pink mantis, which puzzled me because it wasn't in the script.
What is it?
An image of a day-glow hot pink mantis had been used in the lookbook.
Right. Okay.
This must have really burned its way into Nick's brain.
Yeah.
Because that was pretty much the only thing he talked about the first time round. And then when we connected again a couple of weeks later on the phone, again it was pretty much the only thing that he wanted to talk about was the mantis. I started to hum and haw a bit about I don't know if we actually whether we've got the budget to do full CG insects, and then it became clear that it was going to be a deal breaker. And I thought also,
really?
yeah, I thought I might as well get on this, and if I push hard enough, I can get myself in some more creatures. So
Yeah, yeah.
I
Wow.
kind of played it up and insisted that
Mm.
we're going to need a hot pink mutant mantis in this movie if we're going to get it made. So that was kind of
That's
yeah
hilarious.
the next step. And at the point when it was American money,
Mm.
adapted from the work of a classic American author.
Yeah.
I finally caved in and thought, okay, well, look, New England and Arkham County is only a few hundred kilometers south from Quebec anyway. We might as well
Yeah.
cross the border and take it home.
Yeah.
I finally did the thing that I didn't want to do, which was to cut out all of the Francophile black comedy in the movie and dropped the French family, the French next door neighbors out of the script. But yeah, then from the point that Nick agreed to do the movie and essentially signed on the dotted line or made a sort of napkin agreement. We then had approximately 6 weeks to prep the film.
6 weeks.
Yeah, it was roughly
Wow.
6 weeks. Between 6 to 8 weeks was the limit.
That's a quick turnaround.
Nick was only available for 4 weeks, and he was
For
available for
filming?
for filming. Yeah,
Wow.
he was like booked up for the next 2-3 years or something, and but was available for 4 weeks from the last week of January. Which meant that we had 6 weeks over Christmas and New Year, right over the worst time of year to get anything done, for no money. And it was also the middle of the European winter. It was full winter in the Northern Hemisphere, December, January. Worst time to shoot if you're in the backwoods of Arkham or in French Quebec. And initially everyone was like, well, he's going to have to have it set in the snow. And I realized, no, if this thing is set in the snow, it's going to look exactly like the thing. And we don't want it to look like the thing. It cannot be a snow movie. It needs to be set at harvest time. There needs to be large mutant fruit growing on the trees. It's part of the shebang. So this forced us to try and shoot it somewhere where it still looked like summer or where we could still fake it up. And it was really impossible anywhere in the United States. I think we even scouted all the way down in Georgia. It certainly was impossible in New England or Massachusetts in December, January. There was no way we could fake it. So we ended up in Sintra, Portugal, because it's the most southwesterly part of Europe, and it was the one part of Europe where we could count on the trees still having green leaves, and where it was still possible to make it vaguely look like late summer.
Yeah, he did a good job with that then.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy because the next thing was, okay, so it's now set in Arkham County in New England. We moved
Shot
the
in
script
Portugal.
back to America, but we're now going to shoot it in Portugal. Which, plus we needed alpacas. Made alpacas into a deal breaker. I'd refused to do the movie unless we could use alpacas, because people kept thinking the alpacas were maybe fanciful or something that wasn't really that important. So I had to keep digging my heels in and saying, no, either no alpacas and I'm not doing the movie. That needed to be in place, and then
you got rid of the sort of Anglophile, sort of stuff. So having the alpacas is a happy sort of medium, I guess, between the two.
Yeah, it just made a huge difference to me. I figured this Color Out of Space would not have been the same movie if it was a bunch of cows. Or you are right. A bunch of pigs or a bunch of chickens. It had to be alpacas, and
I think the alpacas
ostriches are too dangerous. I thought ostriches, but ostriches kick and are too dangerous to work around.
Yeah, I think you are right. I think the alpacas in the sort of out there nature of an alpaca and Nick Cage go very well together.
That's what I thought. So I had to keep driving to make that match throughout. I just felt it would transform the material and take it somewhere else. So we ended up in Sintra, and to the credit of the Portuguese crew, they managed to pull it off, because literally we turned up in the backwoods of Sintra, and first of all, almost no production designer wanted to work on it. Because all the folk I spoke to in the lead up were like, okay, so this is possible, but it's not possible if you're going to insist on it being New England. to have a New England style farmstead built over Christmas in Sintra. To fake up Arkham is going to be too impossible. If you can reset the script in Portugal and use an existing Portuguese style house, which traditionally have red tiled roofs and flat roofs and a Mediterranean style, then we can do it. But to do it in New England, it was only Katie Byron, the production designer, who ended up doing it, who didn't seem flapped by the idea. And we then found this estate in the backwoods of Sintra, which was really nothing like the farm in the script. It was a vague approximation. But even the farmyard, the front lawn wasn't there. The building that we clad and redressed was kind of sitting on the edge of a ravine. We literally built the farmland around it on rostra. And it's all made out of astroturf. The red barn and the well and even the principal trees are all a set. The entire thing is basically a large outdoor set.
Yeah, done a really good job with that then, because that is very, very good.
I mean, building it on rostra also enabled us to light things and do shit from underneath. So it was super bizarre. It did mean that we had a hell of a time in Foley, because you could detect the hollowness of the set when people were moving too swiftly or thrashing around on the surface. But it was a mad Once Upon a Time in the West type situation. Myself and Katie Byron, the production designer, and the producers went out to this place in Portugal with the Portuguese crew and said, right, you see this ravine, this is going to be a New England farmstead, and we've got approximately 6 weeks to have it ready for camera. So very much like, okay, this wasteland is going to be a station. It was one of those mad moments, and we didn't really believe it was possible. It was a real race against time. We also had to find the remaining cast members. We only had Nick. So we needed to basically cast the entire movie, find the physical effects, create the creatures. And I'm also a stickler for storyboarding. So throughout this process, there was a Portuguese storyboard artist sort of stapled to my hip, drawing frantically as we tried to pre-visualize the entire thing over Christmas and New Year.
That's fascinating then. And so with Color Out of Space then, right? I think like the question has to be asked. It's very cliche because everyone. If I don't ask it, people will be annoyed. But what was it like to work with Nicolas Cage? Because if I don't ask that, anyone watching this will be like, "Oh, what a wasted opportunity." Because that's what most people would like to know about. When anyone has the opportunity to meet Nicolas Cage in person, that's probably on most people's minds.
Well, I got to say that Nick was wonderful. And I've said elsewhere that he kind of single-handedly restored my faith in Hollywood. After Island of Dr. Moreau, but Nick turned out to be a massive treat. I had no idea what to expect after all the stories and after my experiences on Island of Dr. Moreau. So initially, walking up the 1,000 odd steps from my quarters in the cabin up to the rehearsal rooms to meet Nick and start to put the scenes on its feet, I had no idea what to expect. And what I noticed as we got into it is we were consistently running ahead of schedule. Nick always came with so much energy. He prepped in advance and then usually came into the first take or the first read with insane energy. To a large extent, it was kind of all there right at the very beginning. And then it was just sort of a matter of like tuning it down. And also, I think because of Nick's stature and his reputation, the rest of the cast and the crew were really on their game whenever Nick was on set. So generally, the first take or the first walkthrough was absolutely manic. And then we'd turn it down a little, and then we'd do it for camera. And then usually we were bad on the first take, that because something would happen that we were not expecting, and we'd have to go for a second or a third take, and then usually we'd have it.
Wow.
Which
Wasn't that?
yeah, most of the stuff in the movie is the second or the third take. We were getting stuff in the can really, really fast, and which is the reverse of my worst case scenario nightmares. On Island of Dr. Moreau, there was something like 40 main unit days where no shots were taken at all because the cast members refused to come out of their caravans. There was always a stubborn disagreement over how to stage any scene at all. But Nick was an absolute firecracker, and very good at working with the other cast members and raising their morale and getting everyone on side. And in this respect, I realized he was a true movie star. And had that weird light around him, which you only get around actual stars. And when Nick was there, things seemed to go extremely well and smoothly, and even the surrounding animals seemed to behave well, and some kind of weird Hollywood fairy dust kind of fell on the location.
An aura of
I became a huge fan, and was hugely impressed. I only wish we could have continued with that process and gone further off book than we did, because it's to a large extent my job was to try to turn the volume down on what Nick was doing, to rein him in and make Nathan less colourful. I mean, the poor bastard's like wearing a wardrobe in the first half of the movie, which is pretty much made of shades of grey and somber colours. And when he's first sipping from his coffee cup, it's nothing but shades of grey on the cup, and we had to consistently try and make him smaller and kind of reduce what Nick was doing. I would obviously love to have been able to have gone the other way and to have. I kept pushing the throttle. So, but the whole experience was fantastic, and as a result, we actually completed the entire movie one day ahead of schedule. Which is something that's
impressive. Because normally, you have to factor in, reshoot time afterwards because it's gone over, or there's things which were not quite right. So to finish it early and actually be finished is very impressive. So I with respect to characters in the movie, because of course, you spoke about the Dunwich Horror. I mean, one of the characters in the film is Lavinia, isn't it? So was there some sort of seeds? Was there like a nod to kind of where you wanted to go, or previous ideas within the Colorado space? Were you dropping seeds, or was it just your own personal sort of weaving of a new mythos of Lovecraft in there?
Well, I couldn't help it to some extent. I'm such a fan of Lovecraft, and Lavinia is obviously a character who's been completely dropped into the scenario because sadly Lovecraft doesn't give us strong female leads ever, really, apart from in Thing on the Doorstep, and the Gardner family doesn't have a daughter in the original story. It's I think 3 little boys. So we had to basically graft Lavinia into the plot line. I was hoping if I used a little bit of sort of tissue from another Lovecraft story that maybe the graft would hold, and
I think it
would make some kind of sense. But from the point that we moved it back to Arkham County, the point where it went back to west of Arkham, the mythos started to get its claws into me once again, and the desire to show more of Arkham County, to expand the tale came upon me. And it was I took a lot of pleasure in the creating the local radio station, and in the logo on the sheriff's car, and the little details from the local government. And as with hardware, I really wanted to explore that further. We didn't have the budget to properly go into town, but the desire to at some point show what a 21st century Arkham was going to be like, to eventually go back on campus and go to a 21st century Miskatonic University. Was, I want to do that so bad. So that was always, lurking in the back of my mind. So there's little Easter eggs like the weather forecast, where we hear the weather forecast for Dunwich, for Innsmouth, Kingsport, and some of the other towns, just to remind us that we're where we are, that we're in this particular neck of the woods, and and to raise that issue as to what might have happened to Lovecraft country in the course of the last century.
Yeah, okay,
how things changed on campus.
I like it. So was I'm guessing Lavinia was a form of Lavinia.
Yeah, it's a nod to where I'd like to go for the next one, and there's a few little setups. The issue of the audio recording made by the Tommy Chong character Ezra is also something which has sort of fallen in from another Lovecraft story. It owes a little to real life, but it also owes to Whisper in Darkness, to the lonely farmer in the isolated farmstead making the recordings of what he thinks is going on around his cabin, sending them out to the magazines and the press in the hope of alerting people to the fact that there's aliens underneath his farmland.
I like that. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, and that was always supposed to be a setup in that in the drafts for the next two Lovecraft movies, which are currently sitting on my tabletop.
Don't tease this, God.
That's true. The audio recording is really the continuing character. By the time we get to Dunwich, Ezra's recording has become a strange audio file that one of the researchers has from an alleged encounter at the time of the meteor strike, I think 13 years previously. But the audio recording continues because it's kind of on some level, it's kind of the call of Cthulhu. It's kind of the sound of these ultra-dimensional, ultra-terrestrial beings which are interfering with our paradigm. We don't really know what that is, but it's a frequency or a morphogenetic field, something which is essentially inhuman, which is invading our consciousness.
God, I like that. That's good. I like that very much. There were
little setups and Easter eggs in Color Out of Space, which were deliberately pointing towards a wider universe, or an attempt to try and scare up the funding or the interest to keep doing this. The sad thing was that by the time we'd finished the 6 weeks in Sintra, Portugal, I think we had a really efficient movie making machine going. We were in a situation where, had we been allowed to continue, we could have just kept on shooting. I think the crew was already on top of their game, and this is where again my wish that it could have been a fully blown television series, or at least 2 or 3 movies, started to come to me, because we just wanted to shoot more.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, because I remember watching that film, and then the end sort of struck me quite a lot. Like, I was thinking, right, so Lavinia, I almost thought that she'd like somehow, some way, like opened the gate and sort of, basically like opened the gate. It almost become like a key in and unto herself. In some regard, that was kind of like that was how I viewed it. I was like, oh right, that was my interpretation of it. You're going to go, it's completely wrong, but
no, it's pretty much the way it's heading. And I was hoping that we'd get to eventually see Lavinia again. There'd be some manifestation of her character and further down the pike. But Yeah, Color Out of Space is unusual from the point of view that one of the core mythos stories, one of the key stories in of Lovecraft's classics, but no mention is made of any of the deities by name.
No,
Yeah,
no, none at all.
it's where the movie or the story never holds in Yog
Yeah.
Sothoth or Shub-Niggurath or Nyarlathotep or
Mm.
even the Necronomicon. All of the principal lore is left off screen.
Yeah,
It
it's
seems,
almost like it's almost like radiation. It's almost like it's almost like a cosmic kind of radiation that's sort of inspires the whole thing. Almost like a toxic sort of waste situation. That's one of the ways I sort of took from it.
it's probably certainly true in some aspects because there's
Mm.
evidence to suggest Lovecraft was reading about radiation and was researching that at the time. I think he took an interest in the radium girls, the rash of cancer patients that came from the people painting the fluorescent numbers on the watches at that point in time.
Mm.
It was a big newspaper scandal, and if we can see from Lovecraft's letters that this notion of radium and radiation causing cancer had connected into his consciousness in some way. So the color is a kind of somewhere between radiation and I guess that's also the way I took it was the distortion you get at the edge of the human spectrum when you're trying to deal with something which is outside of the spectrum. If we're an ultra-dimensional intrusion into our reality is almost impossible for us to perceive because it's outside of our the limits of our perception.
Yeah, so you interpret it as something other. You sort of contextualize it as something other than what it true representation is because you can't actually see what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing, and ultraviolet and infrared stand at the very limits of the spectrum. So I figure it's probably not actually ultraviolet or infrared; it's something else entirely. But that's as far as we can, we can logically take you.
No, I like that. I like that.
You bring the two together, and it produces magenta. I guess I think it's. Yeah, Kenneth Grant in his Typhonian tradition calls it the mauve zone. Which is the sort of I think Kenneth Grant's idea of the slide area where there's no difference anymore between fiction and fact.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the Color Out of Space, like, obviously, we can't talk too much about, potential futures. And things like that, but in terms of the mythos, because I think to me, the Color Out of Space signified quite a change, like in terms of people viewing the material as being adaptable. Because I think we had the Color Out of Space, and then we had announced there was two other projects that were announced: Lovecraft Country, which is not Lovecraft in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if you've seen that, but
I have, and rather enjoyed it. So
did you? Wow, that's interesting. I got 3 episodes in, and I could not watch any more. That's very interesting. Wow.
Well, for a bunch of different reasons. I mean, it comes back to the issue of Lovecraft's racism and the fact that we do have to acknowledge this. And I think that
that's a surprise.
A bit like as in the advice they give to the kids on Elm Street in the Freddy Krueger movie. You should never turn your back on something.
No, of course not.
If something is terrifying you or something is evil, you should really face it down and try to come to terms with it. It makes more sense to drag Lovecraft's racism out into the open, try to understand it and figure out how it actually factors into his cosmic anti-humanism, into his worldview as a whole, and which then I think opens it up to a larger discussion about.
I agree with all of that, but
Lovecraft's coming from.
I just couldn't get into it. I agree with it. I genuinely agree with everything that you've said there, but I couldn't get into it. I don't know whether it just didn't hit it right for me. I don't know whether I was expecting something else. because obviously, you have your own preconceived notions of things when you go into watching them. So maybe it was that, but that's a surprise. That is a surprise.
Well, it's not the man's work, so that's fair enough. What I would like to see are more movies like Color Out of Space. I'd like to see more legitimate attempts to adapt and interpret the canon of stories.
Yeah.
Because
there was two. Well, there's been another project announced recently, but there was another project announced before, around the same time of Lovecraft Country, which we haven't heard much else on. But it was to do with, it was a very strange thing. It was to have Lovecraft. I can't remember. I think it was an adaptation of another book or a graphic novel about Lovecraft, but there was a heavy focus. I viewed it more as a ridicule of Lovecraft. So they would have him like cross-dressing and things like this, and having all of the manifestations coming into real life and then not there, and it almost, I don't know. I need to take a look at the articles again, because it was a while back. Obviously, we've had COVID all in between all of this as well, so there's been a lot of things announced and then sort of just fallen by the wayside. But there was that announced, and I didn't like the sound of that. And then the only other thing which was serious, which has come to the prominence again, which was Del Toro wanting to do basically wanting to do a whole bunch of stuff with Netflix again. He seems to have like a pretty big deal with Netflix, which I think if there's anyone which is going to be able to do an adaptation similar to the Color Out of Space in terms of taking it seriously as an adaptation of the mythos, I think it would be Del Toro.
He's certainly been making noises about it long enough, and that all of us would really like to see Del Toro finally drop the other shoe and actually make a Lovecraft movie. That would be good. We've been waiting a super long time. And there's also been consistent rumblings about trying to adapt Alan Moore's Providence to television. That's been announced a few times, and I don't know where they're at with that. But it's certainly floated around, and there's at some point, Spike Lee announced that he was producing a Lovecraft movie for kids, I think.
Oh wow!
Point. So there was a rash of odd announcements and a whole flotilla of smaller movies, the Miskatonic University Resonator movie, and a bunch of other things that have been floating around since. And I'm still waiting for someone to step up to the plate and have a go at one of the main titles. We would all like to see a Shadow over Innsmouth, or a Call of Cthulhu, or a Shadow Out of Time, or someone to actually take on one of the classics.
Yeah. So what? Where do you see the mythos going nowadays? And sort of, what's your sort of hope, I guess, for the future of Lovecraft, and how, have you seen it become more, I don't want to say mainstreamed. I mean, it has been more mainstreamed, but, where do you see it going and sort of fluctuating? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems to have kind of fallen a bit by the wayside again, which I think is a bit of a shame in terms of the core. Oh, we want to actually adapt that and actually use his name. They've sort of removed the his element from it, and taking it more from this is an inspired approach from someone else, based on sort of thing.
Well, again, so long as I'm around, it's not going to fall by the wayside, and I think there's a natural tendency to try and reduce Lovecraft's work to humanly acceptable terms. There's a habit of people to belittle the man, make him wear a dress. Can we make him safe for kids? Can we turn Cthulhu back into a soft toy again? That's just, I think, a natural human tendency. It's the only way people know how to deal with cosmic horror, is to try and break it down into something that they can actually wrap their heads around and deal with. Whereas obviously my tendency would be to want to take it the other way and make it into something which is even harder to accept or approach. I mean, for me, Color Out of Space kind of cast the circle. It deliberately starts with with the young witch casting a magic circle to do her incantation or summon the thing. But it wasn't until I got back to Miskatonic University and until I can get on campus and get access to the restricted section of the library that I can get my hands on a copy of the Necronomicon and actually name the deities. So part of the drive for the next movie, of course, is to try to recreate the Miskatonic University library and to try and create a definitive Necronomicon where we could actually have a page 751 where Wilbur's quest to get to page 751. So and this, of course, would then give us the opportunity to codify the mythos, to give the names of these unspeakable alien deities and to hear them pronounced by one of the spawn of the Old Ones. Wilbur's not entirely human, so his glottal pronunciation of the names, even the way he speaks, is apt to be a bit strange at times and ducks in and out of human auditory range. So it would certainly be a chance to codify the mythos and then to work towards actually bringing on one of these deities, which doesn't quite happen in Color Out of Space, and I imagine probably wouldn't happen until the ending of the second movie. But I would like to actually manifest the Old Ones in a form which would retain their full apocalyptic intensity, because I have a plush Cthulhu that I cuddle up with at night, but I still have a great desire to try and reverse that process and turn Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth back into things that are so hard to conceptualize and wrap one's head around that one's hair might turn white at the very thought of it.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it.
I figure that's the way forward with Lovecraft, is to try to take his main concept seriously. I'm happy to play the human beings for laughs, because so much of the rest is kind of black comedy. But the Old Ones and the actual ultra-dimensional force itself, I think, needs to be approached carefully. It's something that everyone's avoided doing in the past. Which is why so many of the Lovecraft adaptations don't feel like real Lovecraft, because they they get caught up in the tentacles and in the gore and in the campier aspects of it. Or we've seen franchises coming from some of the sort of non-mythos stories in a way, like Herbert West Reanimator. There's been a general reticence to actually look into the pit to actually try and deal with that formless whirling chaos at the center of the stories.
Well, I think so. To me, one of my favorite beings is always Azathoth or Azathoth, however you want to pronounce that, because I just think what a great concept, a being which has essentially manifested all of existence just in his dreams, and then you have these sort of mad flute-playing entities trying to keep him asleep, sort of serenading him asleep, because if he wakes up, boom, we're all dead. Just something which it's just such a what a great idea, what a great concept.
It's a big idea, and it's come to Lovecraft through a few sources as well. It's not quite Lovecraft's idea, but I think it's come via Lord Dunsany and through Beckford, the guy who wrote Vartek. I think Lord Dunsany has Mana Yud Sushai, who dreams are reality. There's this character of Scar, the drummer, who drums while Mana sleeps. And so long as Scar the drummer drums, Mana sleeps, and the drumming holds the dream and the whole world together. And the moment the drummer stops, Mana will awaken, and our universe will cease to exist. So yeah, we know Lovecraft was a huge fan of this book of the gods of Pagana, so that somehow impacted on his consciousness. He mentions in his correspondence his obsession influence from Vatek, this arabesque romance written by Beckford, who is an intensely scary individual from British semi-aristocratic richest man in England. Family made all their money from sugar and the slave trade. Accused of pedophilia, fled England, wrote Vatek in a single sitting. One book only before holing up in Sintra, Portugal. Because insanely, the place where we were shooting Colour Out of Space was where Beckford ended up. So this kind of brought me back to Beckford's original story of the demon sultan Vatek, and Azathoth, his initial conception as the demon sultan whose knighted throne stands at the center of infinity, evoked
the blind idiot god.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. It's kind of an attempt to put a face or a form to chaos, which I think has been ongoing for for at least 150 years. I think through Dunsany and through Beckford, these characters were trying to give form to or a face to chaos in some way. And Lovecraft finally arrives at Azathoth, but Azathoth is so unspeakable and so formless that we can't even perceive him. We perceive Azathoth as Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep is the avatar of Azathoth, so Nyarlathotep is Azathoth reduced to humanly acceptable terms.
I find that interesting, like, because Nyarlathotep is pretty much the only one of the gods which seemingly has some form of like motive, like a desire, whereas all the others are very much described and as something which is incomprehensible, or at the very least the actions of which are seemingly incomprehensible. Like Nyarlathotep, there's like a purpose, like he sort of walks among us and he's sort of doing these things. There's almost like a malice behind the actions, which is comprehensible. Like we can all understand malice and hatred, and it's interesting how that was one of the ones which, out of all of them, there's one which seemingly has like a motive that can be sort of comprehended, but not. I always find that to be quite an interesting.
We're a big fan of Nyarlathotep. One of the aspects of Nyarlathotep that speaks most closely to my twisted heart is the fact that he's also an entertainer. Nyarlathotep is a showman.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bashfulness, a boastfulness. There's like an ego, I guess.
Well, he even seems to be a filmmaker at one point. In the dream, he has some kind of apparatus which shows scenes that are thrown upon a screen, according to the story. He even gives a movie show or some kind of presentation to the audience. So there's this aspect of this avatar of chaos. So certainly speaks to my heart, and he's also inherently foreign. Lovecraft's not clear as to how foreign. He implies that Nyarlathotep is coming from Egypt or from Africa. So that Nyarlathotep is the foreign showman, the avatar of chaos, who brings this chaotic message to Lovecraft's providence, and shows them images on the screen which drive everyone mad, or at least awaken them to a different understanding of their universe, so that when they leave the theater, they discover that they're no longer in quite the same world, that the entire paradigm has shifted slightly.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating.
And somebody's got to play that part. I mean, wow, why has nobody written a movie with Nyarlathotep in it yet? Because it's just such a role for someone.
That'd be a meaty role for people to get their teeth into as well, I think.
We need more screen Nyarlathoteps.
Yeah, I concur. I completely concur with that. Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, good. So I think that'll probably about wrap it up for today. I've taken quite a large quantity of your time. I keep looking. I'm like, oh, we're well over an hour now. So I think we'll sort of wrap it up there. But yeah, is there anything you want to? You spoke about your website. Do you want to say a few words about your website or anything that you said? I mean, I'd like to do this again, obviously, but
That would be a pleasure. I mean, I'm currently up to my eyeballs in it, is all I can say. I've got on the website, I've got a running blog which is attempting to explain what's going on here in the French Pyrenees, where I'm very much stuck in this slide area between fact and fiction. Insanely, since moving here, I've discovered the names of many of Lovecraft's deities in the place names on the map, mostly from 19th century maps. We've got two Kugelus.
okay.
Kugulu on one side of the valley and Kugulu on the other side of the valley, both of which are ancient pre-Christian, possibly pre-human Neolithic sites. And we've got a Kuguru, which is the same name again with an R substituted in the middle, just down the road. Triangulate them both, and you end up in the largest limestone district in Europe, which is officially named the Cthulhu Demoniac. That's I didn't call it that. The people who found it called it that. The main gallery in the cave is known as the Necronomicon. So I'm kind of right in the thick of it. Very much hoping that once the current apocalypse is past, or at least once it's settled down a little, that we'll be able to get started on Dunwich, because still fully intending to bring Wilbur Whately to the screen. And Wilbur is very much the Lovecraftian Antichrist. The human spawn of the old ones, and I'm looking forward to having a human face and a human mouth to try to communicate some of the deeper ideas, because on Color Out of Space, really, I figured you've got to break things down into bite-sized chunks for folk, like only the first 7 words count. So Color was just all about drumming home cosmic horror, cosmicism, and this concept of cosmic anti-humanism. So I think the cosmic horror now is in people's heads. And I think that they're ready for a slight evolution. Everyone got so used to the idea that all of Lovecraft's characters go mad or insane, that there is no hope for the human race, that Dunwich seemed like the way to go, because apart from introducing the Necronomicon, we also see in Dunwich the beginning of an effective fight back in the form of Armitage, Rice, Morgan, and the other characters who start to comprehend circumstances and find a way of dealing with it. And there's a bunch of very odd things that happen in that story, which I would really like to see brought to screen. I mean, the whole battle between the Wilbur, the Whately family, who are dispossessed, kind of rustic white trash who have been persecuted for centuries, pushed from one place to another, until Wilbur is finally pushed to take his granddad's Civil War era Colt 45 and go on campus and aim the evil Civil War era gun at the librarian, the guardian of what we take to be civilization, the state, democracy, and everything else. I think there's some very interesting core conflicts in within Dunwich, which I would like to very much to see articulated.
I think most people watching this would, is very happy to hear that there's the potential for that still to happen. So I'll leave, I'll leave your website down below in the description box. But like I said, it'd be really good to do this again, just to catch up and have, like a conversation about it. Maybe we can get some questions from anyone who obviously, enjoyed this one. Put some kind of questions to you as well to kind of throw in there. But this was good. I enjoyed this.
It's been bags of fun, sir. I mean, I've been enjoying your stuff, and one of the wee problems of being down here in Occitania in the French Pyrenees is that I never get to meet anyone who speaks the same language as myself, or let alone who is conversant with the actual source material.
Well, even in
it's a huge-
civilization, it's few and far between. So, oh dear. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. So thank you for your time. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.